spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down my spine. Guys, it's spooky season, even though it's the last week of August. I don't care, it's spooky season. I've decorated, I have the jumper on, I have the mug. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Francesca's Books. My name is Francesca, these are my books, and here we talk about all things thriller books. And this is a very special video because it's gonna be spooky thriller books. Now, the issue with recommending books around this time of year is that pretty much all thriller books are gonna fall into this category because there's gonna be some sort of darkness, some sort of like guesswork, some sort of plot twist, and for non-thriller readers this is kind of where everybody tends to go. However, as a through and through thriller reader, as I am, and as most of you guys are, I've worked very hard to make sure that these are like the best of the best in this video for you. So first I'm going to chat about 5 spooky season thriller books which I wholeheartedly recommend, ones I've read, loved, and would just recommend to anyone, and then I'm going to tell you about the 7 books that are on my spooky season TBR. These are the ones that I've like collected from loads of like thriller book reviewers as the best ones, and what I'm personally going to be reading for the next couple of months. So these do range from like a classical psychological thriller that has like a tiny spooky twist on it, like a good one to read in October, but nothing really Halloweeny or spooky about it, all the way through to actual horror books, which I'm going to dip a toe into. Nothing is going to be like super scary apart from the very last one, because I don't know, I like a challenge nowadays. So if you're not like a horror fan, I mean, I don't even know if I'm a horror fan really, I am just a thriller reader, so it's going to be interesting to dabble into over the next couple of months. But if that is like not your area at all, I'm going to rank each of these sections from least spooky to most spooky, so you can kind of just like put them on a bit of a scale. So I hope you find that helpful. And without further ado, these are the 5 thriller books that I would wholeheartedly recommend. So I'm going to start off with a couple of dark academia books because these are just perfect for this time of year but aren't like scary or spooky necessarily. They're just like perfect vibes for this season. So the very first one I'm going to recommend is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I personally think this book gets a very bad reputation because it's the second book from the same author who wrote The Silent Patient, and I think everyone read that book. It was a very popular, it still is one of the most popular thriller books to this day, and then they kind of went into his second book with like an expectation. I mean, you kind of would really, but this is like a different genre. This was like psychological thriller. This is very much like dark academia thriller, and I really enjoyed this. So it's set in October, it's set at Cambridge University. I mean, the vibes are just there already, and it basically follows this one college student whose best friend was unalived, and she was part of this like group called The Maidens, and everything was just kind of like a bit sus. Then enter Mariana, college student Zoe's auntie, who's actually also a group therapist. She goes to visit Zoe just like for the weekend, see how she's getting on, and she kind of just gets tangled in this web. I think I suspected every single one of the characters in this book at some point. I also feel like dark academia is quite hard to get right. I don't see many books that actually do this genre right because it can either be too literary and you kind of lose interest, I lose interest, or it can be like really cringy and just like not fun. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this. And then another dark academia book which I would definitely recommend, still on the low end of the spook scale, is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. I think this is my favourite dark academia book of all time. It's just so beautifully written. There is some amazing characters in this. There's a little romantic subplot. We all know how much I love that. It really wrapped up at the end, and it wasn't told from like a million points of view, which I really enjoyed. It was told from Jess, our main character's point of view, and then some other characters had like an odd chapter here and there, which I guess some people could find a little bit jarring, but I personally loved it. It was like now and again when you didn't really expect it, just kind of changed the pace up a bit. So this follows 6 ex-college friends, and they go back for a reunion 10 years after they've left, and it turns out that one of them was unalived when they were at college, and they never really got to the bottom of what happened or who it was. So it's a bit of a story of like unraveling that. I really enjoyed this as well because it's from the perspective of people who went to university obviously 10 years ago, and myself now not being 18, that is just like the point of view that I was craving, instead of like following university and college students who are at college at the time. Like this is just like, this is perfect. I mean, I left uni maybe like 8 years ago, so I was just absolutely eating this up. So now on to psychological thrillers, and this next book is still at the very low end of the spook factor, but it is a psychological thriller. I would definitely recommend The Girls Who Disappeared by Claire Douglas. This was the very first Claire Douglas book I read, and it was absolutely brilliant. I've read so many of her books since, and this one specifically is perfect for this time of year because it follows this journalist who goes to this small town, and there's been loads of unalivings along this road called the Devil's Corridor. So our female main character Jenna, who's like this journalist podcaster, is just so determined to like get to the bottom of this. There's also some really good side characters in this as well. I just had a really good time. It is just a classic psychological thriller, but I feel like that puts like the spooky twist on it, but there is no horror in this whatsoever. Then we go up the spook factor a tiny bit, but this is more creepy than spooky, and it is Hidden Pictures by Jason McCurlock. This is like the perfect spooky season read for a thriller girl. Like through and through. This is it. If you take one recommendation, it's this one. I talk about this book all the time because I absolutely loved it, and if I'd have read it in October, I probably would have rated it like 5 stars plus. So this follows a nanny called Mallory, and she goes to look after this really troubled child called Teddy in this like wealthy family, and he starts drawing like really weird pictures, and she just gets super creeped out. Let me show you. So Teddy tells Mallory this is like his best friend, but obviously she's been looking after him all day and he's not had any friends around. So she's like, is this an imaginary friend? And the final book that I definitely recommend for spooky season is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is definitely one of my favourite books by Riley Sager, and I just cannot even tell you how perfect this would be to read in autumn. What a great book as well. So this follows Maggie, who returns to her family's abandoned home 25 years after they fled due to supposed paranormal goings on. So she goes back to like uncover whether there is actually any truth in these rumours. She doesn't really believe it, but she wants to find out for herself because she's a bit of like a pseudo celebrity. Everybody kind of knows her business, knows who she is, and she's like, I need to put these rumours to bed. This basically sums the book up. It says, she may have been too young to really remember what happened, but Maggie doesn't believe a word of her father's book. Ghosts, after all, don't exist. And I can't really tell you more about this, and I can't even tell you really how much spook there is in it, because that is kind of the whole plot, uncovering what happened. So just trust me that this is brilliant, it's creepy, it's tense, and even as a thriller reader, you'll love it. So those are my top picks of things I've already read, and then now onto the 7 books that are on my spooky season TBR. The ones I'm actually most excited for are going to come at the back end of this list towards the higher end of the spook scale, and that is just because like, I'm just feeling a bit savage, and I've followed a few like horror booktokers, booktubers, bookstagrammers recently who've recommended these. So again, we're going to start at the low end of the scale and work our way up. So this is a little bit of guesswork because of course I've not read these 7 books, but this is like based on other reviews, the synopsis, etc. And the very first book is Cackle by Rachel Harrison. Now I've read The Return by Rachel Harrison and definitely liked it. That is definitely a horror book. However, one of my good thriller reader friends recommended this and said that it was a 5-star even though she just reads thriller, so I thought, I'm gonna give it a go. So this basically follows our main character who moves from Manhattan to like a really small town like upstate New York after she's been dumped by her boyfriend, and she just wants to start over, and everything's going really well. Like she gets a new job, she meets lots of new friends, everything's going really well, and then she meets this one girl who's like just an absolute enigma, and she just cannot work her out. So she like tries to befriend her, and then things go from there. And this is basically what sold me on this book. It says, a deliciously dark feminist tale of witches, bad ex-boyfriends, good coffee, and friendly spiders. And I just thought, is this play about us? So I feel like this is going to be like a gothic contemporary, but I'll keep you updated of course. And then next is actually like a YA horror, because I feel like that is definitely on the lower end of this scale, and it is All the Hidden Monsters by Amy Jordan. And I actually got sent this book because it's set in like the underworld of Manchester, which is like my closest city where I live in the UK. So I just thought that was really interesting, really exciting, and I was like, do you know what, immediately, yeah. So this follows a teen by day, werewolf by night who's trying to solve an unaliving of one of her friends, and she teams up with this like other supernatural guy to try and understand exactly what's happened. And I feel like this is like a mix of all genres. Like there's obviously a little bit of fantasy due to like the creature that she is. It's thriller because they're like playing detective, trying to work out what's happened, and then I'm guessing like it's a little bit of horror because it's set in the underworld, but I just don't feel like it's going to be that scary. So if you've read this and it is, then I think I need a pre-warning, but it just sounds really good and like really cozy for when I'm not feeling like something like too intense. So next up is Final Girls by Riley Sager, and I feel like any Riley Sager book kind of just falls into this category. If there's any books of his that you haven't read, I would definitely recommend reading them at this time of year. All of them are kind of like thrillers with a bit of spook, but this one seems like the most spooky. So it's about a final girl who survives a massacre, and then events start like coming back up 10 years later. So another final girl gets unalived, and she's like, oh my god, like am I going to be next? So I have heard that this isn't Riley Sager's best book. I feel like this is his least favourite amongst like pretty much everyone that I follow, but I'm gonna read it. I think it is the last one that I have to read, and I've kind of been saving it also because I don't want to finish his backlist, and also because of the time of year. Next up, of course, is another Dark Academia, because I need at least one a year to like keep me going, and this year I've chosen If We Were Villains by L.M. Rio. I don't think this has any like spook or paranormal or horror elements at all. This is just going to be a through and through Dark Academia thriller, but it does follow a guy who's gone to prison for unaliving someone 10 years ago, and now he's out. He's like trying to claim his innocence, I think. So he then goes on to confront the detective that put him away 10 years ago, and of course it's in a Dark Academia setting. This is like one of the staples of the genre, so I'm quite surprised I've not read it yet. I feel like this and The Secret History are like the go-to dark academia books, but I feel like The Secret History was a little bit too heavy for me at the time. I read that as quite a new reader, so I feel like now being more of an experienced reader that I will enjoy this a lot more. So the next 3 books are definitely going to rank higher on like the spooky scale, but they are the ones that I'm definitely the most excited to read and the ones I've bought like specifically for this time of year. I'll also do a little reading vlog on these more scarier books so you guys can see like just how scary they are and if you do want to read them. Next up, when you look for books to read during spooky season, this is like the one recommendation that I continue to get. Like no matter which platforms I was looking on, no matter who I was asking, this just seems to be the it book of October. So it is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. So this opens in like 1980 something and this woman is unalived in the Sundown Motel. Then it flips to like present day, 35 years later, where the niece of the lady that was unalived goes to like see if she can work out what's happened. And I think by the sounds of it, she gets caught in the same loop that her auntie did and with the same like paranoias, the same fears. And I'm just really excited to read it. Lovely cover. Riley Sager on the front says, deliciously creepy, a chilling blend of mystery and ghost story. Love that for you, Riley. It's also quite short as well, so I feel like this would be like a good intro book. And then this next book does actually sound like a bit creepy, I'm not gonna lie. It sounds like a very tense thriller. And it is Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. So this follows a couple that move to a new apartment in New York. They get gifted it or they win it, which is just super sus to start with. They go and move in, and after a really traumatic childbirth, the wife is having like a really bad time, like postpartum. She's really struggling with the baby and her paranoia is just like at an all-time high. But then even weirder stuff starts happening and she finds like little bite marks on the baby. Can you even imagine? Like, can you even imagine? I don't know more than that. You guys know that I don't tend to read much about books before I read them, but that was enough to sell me on this. I actually ordered this from America. It's like the big paperback size because I couldn't find it anywhere in the UK, but that's not a problem. We're here to deliver. I feel like this is one I'm gonna have to read with the lights on though. And then for my final recommendation, I also ordered this one from America. I will see if I can get some UK links for you guys to put in the description of this. It might have just been that it was like pre-UK publication. But the final book on this list is Incidents Around the House by Josh Ballerman, and I am prepared to be very scared. Very, very scared indeed. One of my favourite thriller book talkers, Sydney Books, actually said this was the scariest book she's ever read, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it, honestly. Grady Hendrix described it as, this book is the monster that lives inside your closet. Wouldn't be spooky season without being spooked though, would it? Like, let's be real. So this book is told from the point of view of an 8-year-old girl who lives with her parents, and when her parents go to bed, she starts talking to other mummy, who comes out the closet and talks to her. And this other mummy keeps asking to enter Bella's heart. I'm assuming that means like being possessed, and Bella, even as an 8-year-old, realizes that this isn't right and I'm gonna have to tell a grown-up. I've never actually read a book from the point of view of a child, so I feel like this is going to be really interesting. Like some books you have chapters from the point of view of a child, like Everyone Here Is Lying and The Perfect Child do have some parts that are told from the child's point of view, which is quite interesting in itself, but I've never read a book that's like solely from the child's point of view, so I'm not sure how that's going to work. But I did read like from the author that the book is laid out as if it's coming from like a child's mind, so like the pages aren't super full, which I think is really interesting. So as well as it being a good thriller, a good horror, been super highly recommended. I'm really interested to give that a go as well. So those are 12 amazing thriller books that I definitely recommend you check out this spooky season. If any of these take your eye, do drop me a comment and let me know. And of course, if you've read any of these already, I would love to know what you thought. As always, the links to these books are in the description, along with all my other channels and everything else that you could probably need from me. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I cannot wait to see you next time.